So I'm going to say a quick prayer.
Okay.
Father God, we come humbly before you in Jesus' name, hoping that you would bless this video and that your anointing would go out and go through, and that love and harmony and fellowship would be felt throughout the entire planet. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah,
might not be your goal, but
I know. That's all right. Maybe for today. Maybe one day I'll be peaceful.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Yeah, sure. But anyhow, no, we can still do that. That can happen. So anyway, what did we talk about?
Well, let me start just by telling my
do testimony. Let's
we'll
make this a real church service.
Yeah, we'll touch on my little testimony.
We had song service, so now you got to testify. Right, we prayed. Now, okay, go ahead. I haven't done this in a while. Go ahead. I forgot what church was like. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I first became a Christian I grew up in a Baptist church, and then in the early 2000s, I had an experience where I was transformed from a carnal Baptist to an on-fire Pentecostal, basically. I was speaking in tongues, and I had revelations of the Bible, revelations of Jesus, revelation of eternal life, and the love of God the Father, and long story short, I had a transformative experience where I only cared about carnal, fleshly, earthly things, and then it's kind of like Pompeii, one day and one night, all that passed away, and the life of Christ, the love of Christ, the Holy Spirit became alive in me through a series of prayers that I prayed. So then, when I visited different churches, different non-denominational churches, some Pentecostal churches, but at some point it was almost anywhere I could get to. You know what I'm saying? I was craving that fellowship. Also, I was trying to understand what happened to me. It was a very, very powerful experience of transformation. And so I visited different churches, and I never could find one that really felt like home. I would go here, here, and here, and I'd pick up a little bit as I went, and then one day, I would say 5 to 7 years after I had that transformative experience, one of my uncles, who was a message believer, was down visiting from South Carolina. Ever heard of this?
Oh yeah, that's where you went up there and you was dribbling basketball.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll let you tell it.
Yeah. So, one of my uncles was down visiting family in Louisiana, and my aunt decided to stay. And I'm assuming through the work of the Holy Spirit, my uncle invited me to come up to South Carolina to visit him for a while. So when I got on the way there in his car, he was listening to Brother Branham on messages, and I was listening, and that's good. And I remember him saying, "This is a prophet," and I said, "Can't wait to meet him."
Gee, I thought those were over with. Oh, well, I didn't mean that towards oh, never mind. I meant that in old terms, like message terms, not modern terms. Okay. But anyway, yeah, right. Go ahead.
So on the way up there, I'm listening to Brother Branham, and I'm really, just kind of feeding off of it. And I told him I can't wait to meet him. He laughed because I had no idea he was dead
for 40 years.
Off the scene for 40 plus years. And because this must have been in the late 2000s when this happened. Mid to late 2000, 2005, 2007. So I stay in South Carolina with my uncle for roughly 3 to 4 months. During that time, I'm not going to call it a message church. Going to a message church.
I'll call them a message church. Good.
I was going to a message church in Greenville, South Carolina, something along those lines. Pastor's name was Luke Gibson, and he was a very fiery, very straightforward
message pastor.
Message pastor, message pastor, yes. And he was very serious about what he was doing and very anointed. Honestly, the services were anointed, where it would just be a strong presence of peace and love and the Holy Ghost. So visited his church for 2 or 3 or 4 months, And when I wasn't working, I had a little cassette player, and I would listen to Brother Branham preach in my headset
Listen to this story, folks.
while dribbling a basketball up and down my uncle's driveway. And one of the most frustrating things, though, is I was wearing that tape player on my hip. Every time I would bounce that basketball, sometimes it would come back up and knock the tape player off my hip, and it would hit the ground.
I'll tell y'all what's funny. I asked Lucas the other day, I'd asked him before and forgot, but I asked him, I said, are you any good at playing basketball? Because he's 6'1", naturally, you're like, it's stereotypical, hey, you got to ask a tall man if he's good at basketball, right? So anyway, yeah, with long arms. So, and he's like, no, he just didn't have the coordination for it. But it's funny, though, if you think about it, that whenever he was out there listening to William Branham and dribbling the basketball, he got good at William Branham, but he didn't get good at basketball.
I got a little
bit better.
I can do a crossover, and I can do a backwards crossover.
You're pretty good if you do a crossover.
Yeah. I got a little better. I was focused on the message. I wasn't really, I was just trying to busy my hands while my mind was soaking in the message. So I was drawn to it, and I was absorbing it, and I was enjoying it, and I was there, just me and my uncle, and my aunt come back eventually. But after about 4 months of being there, it was time for me to come home, and I gathered up a suitcase full of message books, church age books, man from God book, testimony books, and a whole box full of cassette tapes and what have you and whatnot. And I boarded a Greyhound bus, and I was headed from somewhere in South Carolina to somewhere in Louisiana. And less than halfway, literally on the bus, I'm sitting back there, and in this transition period from
breach, you were in the breach.
I was in the breach.
The breach of your life of understanding.
And on that bus, I received supernatural revelation, an unveiling of my mind concerning the truth and validity of William Branham being a true prophet. And whatever his ministry did or was or is had a very, very significant effect on the human race in my life, and it was no longer just a head knowledge. And something very similar happened to me back in the early 2000s, but instead of a revelation of William Branham being a true prophet, I had a revelation of Jesus being the true Messiah. And it was both of those things that just came alive in me. I want to say erupt, but I also don't want to overplay it. I mean, it was just something that, it was almost as if the revelation truth of it had been inside of me all along, and then when I heard the message, it came to life somehow. It was like light struck the seed, and it had already been in my spirit, and then just like the pond lily, it came out, and I so then
the eagle cry went over.
Yeah, the eagle cry went over, and I heard it, and it made sense, and it brought something alive in me. So then, of course, whenever I got back, the very first thing I did was try to tell my family about the serpent seed.
Lucas, you could have started with anything. You have to start with that. I mean, you could have went light on it.
I went balls in on it.
Balls deep.
I said, here it is. I laid it out, and I still remember my stepfather's face contorting when I tried to tell him about that. So, long story short, they had already heard. My family is 60% Baptist, 40% Pentecostal, and 10% message believers. So everybody in my family knows of and who William Branham is. They know about him.
They know about him even if they don't.
Whenever I came back trying to tell them, hey, look, you need to take a second look at this, they didn't want to hear it. So I spent the subsequent years fellowshipping. There was one family in a town called Walker, Louisiana, and some of you guys watching may be familiar with Denham Springs, Louisiana, where Brother Branham preached several messages in the high school auditorium in Denham Springs, Louisiana. If you get back on you ever get back on the Voice of God website and you're going through the list of
and we probably listened to one, don't even know it.
Yeah, but it was preached in Denham Springs, Louisiana, which I lived at for about 10 years, and I lived in that area for closer to 20. And so there was still one couple who was strong in the message, and they were in their 70s probably when I met them. And Dominic Nuccio, some of you might know his name, Nuccio, N-U-C-C-I-O. He was a barber from Walker, Louisiana, and he was dedicated to William Branham's message. He had the pictures, he had a whole library, and he would on Sunday mornings, he would, through the phone lines, listen in on a sermon with a preacher somewhere in Houston, Texas area. And they would get in on the phone lines and they would fellowship, through the cables.
Yeah, pre-Pal
Pre-internet, pre-Pal Talk, pre-internet, pre-Facebook.
Pre-YouTube,
Yeah, pre all that. And I would sit in with them on Sunday mornings and sometimes Wednesday evenings, I guess. Or we would just sit and listen to Brother Branham, and it was some of the best time of my life, honestly, because that was before I'd ever heard of the Third Testaments. That was before I heard of Don Parnell.
That's coming up next, right?
Yeah.
That's good, go ahead.
Yeah, and so then, so it was some of the best times of my life in one sense, because here I was with this supernatural revelation of a ministry and with almost no one to fellowship with around it. But when I was there was a strong, peaceable spirit, and I can let my hair down, so to speak, and not have to worry if I gotta wade through some kind of intellectual argument about why I'm wrong and deceived or what have you from some people who will remain unnamed. But anyway, I was able to enjoy myself in fellowship with them. Eventually, I picked up another job and I moved away, and I've been a traveler all my life, We
call him Luke the Drifter.
Luke the Drifter, yeah.
Yeah.
My family was from Florida. Some of my family's from Louisiana, and we just moved around a lot growing up.
The rabbits, how's it go? The rabbits have holes, the birds have nests, but the Son of Man has
nowhere to lay his head.
That's Lucas. Yeah. He's the living embodiment of that. His whole life is a living embodiment.
I cannot argue that point. Yeah, and so been a drifter, been around, been a lot traveling, and so eventually I just kind of, I think Brother Nuccio passed away in the early 2010s, somewhere along those lines, and so I didn't get the chance to see him in the years beforehand, but and then somewhere after that time, within 5-6 years after that, Facebook became a thing. And I was on Facebook one day, and totally out of the blue, Brother Elijah, how you doing? This is where you come into my little story if you happen to be watching this. And I was on Facebook one day, and totally out of the blue, here comes Jeff Elijah.
I'll tell you what, it reminds me of something that Bill Blade said. He said that, at least he's the person I heard this from. He said one time that whoever it was that brought you the message, they were the ones that opened the seals to you.
Really?
Jeff Elijah,
Yeah.
he would have been basically your seal opener, because he was the guy that brought the revelation of the one.
I remember being at one of the conference meetings we used to have in Dayton, and I was telling someone asked me how did I hear about the Testaments, the Third Testament message, Brother Don, and I said, well, I told them what I'm about to tell you. I was on Facebook, and out of the blue, here comes Jeff Elijah. Hi, how are you doing? Check out this video. And here's a video of Don preaching, Brother Don preaching the...
he said
out of the blue. Didn't know who he was.
No idea.
Didn't know who he was. No prior connection to anybody in the message or
Talking about planting the seed and it growing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Brandon, so he sent me a link to either a YouTube video or a video on Facebook, or maybe just an MP3. I don't know. Don't know how he found me. don't care at this point. Kind of, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah, right.
Jeff Elijah was the one
He
who
planted the seed and it grew 6
planted
foot 1
this-
inches tall. It grew the same size as Lucas.
planted the seed and introduced me to Brother Don, and then I was probably 2 messages in, 3 messages in, maybe the same day. This would have been in 2009-ish, 2010 maybe, and within less than 2 hours probably, I listened to Brother Don's message. A very similar thing happened to me as whenever I received the revelation concerning Jesus being the Christ. I received the revelation of William Branham being the prophet, and then I received the revelation of Don Parnell being a prophet.
I call it an oh shit moment. That's what I call it. Oh shit. Oh shit.
It was supernatural in its nature, and it birthed something in me that's still here. And so it kind of reminds me of what Brother Branham said about how the church ages were like a Roman candle, and one light, boom, and then another light, and then another light, and then so revelation of Jesus being the Christ, one light from the Roman candle. Revelation of William Branham being a prophet, another light from the Roman candle.
And you know what? It's funny, isn't it? Is it not ironic that it's called a Roman candle? And the church ages were, you know, the age when Rome ruled everything.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Pisces is religion and it's religious minded. So it's ruled through the Roman Catholic Church, and it's a Roman candle that blows, you know, that does the 7 church ages. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Brother Jeff sent me those videos, and I watched them, and within hours, I was just feeding off the wedding supper of the Lamb, and absorbing the message and taking it in, and it was just, you know, revelation upon revelation, and then of course at that time, Facebook, people were still using Facebook. You know, it's different now. 15 years ago, Facebook was a different animal. It was much less commercialized. You know, you didn't get bombarded by every kind of invite to every weird thing. You know, you could still just watch people's pictures and what they had for dinner. And so I started trying to share, you know, some of the Third Testament messages with my family, and just right on Facebook. That created a lot of conflict. You know, nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody could accept Jesus as the Spirit. You know what I'm saying? Who's been here since Pentecost. And
I consider that to be basically the circumcision. To me, that's the modern equivalent of circumcision.
That's pretty good.
Right, because if you can believe that, you're an Israelite.
Yeah.
But now, of course, Israelites, you got different types of Israelites. But that, to me, is the very simple one message that circumcises you into the potentiality to what else you can be as an Israelite.
Yeah, because that's John, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the verse that's coming to mind. John said, of course, who is an antichrist except him who denies that Jesus is come in the flesh. And on the surface, when you read that verse, you think Jesus did come in the flesh, as in Jesus came in the flesh 2,000 years ago in a 33-year-old body. But that's not what it says. What it actually says is Jesus is come in the flesh. And I believe it's the flesh of our bodies.
Right.
It's right here, right now.
Right.
He's been here for 2,000 years.
He
is come
wherever
in the
you
flesh.
see him.
He is come in my body, in this flesh right here.
Yep.
And I really believe that's the crux of the division between the Spirit of Christ and the Antichrist spirit. In the Catholic Church and all the denominations, they're clinging to Jesus. It's that Trinitarian doctrine that keeps them from seeing the true light, that Jesus, the man, became a quickening spirit. Right. We're not waiting for him to return and do anything. We are enjoying his presence right here, right now. That's the biggest hurdle.
That's what we're doing.
That's the thing.
What we are.
Yeah.
Right here, right now, doing this.
That's the purpose and the point, is to recognize that Jesus is everywhere.
Mm-hmm. If you, dare I say, I think at times people have said, if you don't believe anything, believe that one.
Yeah.
That's probably number one.
Well, that's how John recognized the difference between the true Christ spirit and the Antichrist spirit. is the people who recognize that Jesus is with us and he'll never leave us nor forsake us. Unlike the denominations which believe that Jesus did leave us and will come back someday, but he left us.
Right.
But that's not true
He
at all.
couldn't. How could he have done
But
that?
that's not true at all.
How could he
He's
have done
here
that?
with us right now.
How could he forsake you if he said, "I'll never leave you nor forsake you"?
Yeah.
Good, that's what you're saying. It's a
He
good
didn't
point.
leave.
It's a
He
good
didn't
point.
leave, yeah. He became the Holy Spirit.
It's just that nobody knew it.
Yeah.
Nobody knew it for
Mhm.
you know the
Until William Branham
moons,
came along.
phases of the moon, and then finally.
Or basically until William and Brother Branham, till William and Don came along and put these pieces together, and now we see it for ourselves.
Yep. First ride and second ride.
And now we're not waiting for a future event; we're enjoying the present moment.
Right, and I'll tell you another thing. The other day, I was kind of trying to explain that to a message person, and I was talking about where William Branham said that the second ride. He said, "We'll ride this trail again one day. There'll be an odd person, but as long as it's a word, you stick with it. We'll ride this trail again." And they said their response to it was, "Did you hear what he said?" He said, "We'll ride this trail again." You know, as to say that somebody was going to come along and was going to repeat the things that William Branham did and do what he did, and not, you know, this third coming and beyond type of thought. But I got to think about it, and I thought, no, that's really a good statement what he said, because they did ride this trail again, because William Branham, that's what he was saying back then, was what we're saying now. We just didn't, you know, so it was that trail again, because it was just that nobody knew what the heck William Branham was saying back then. Right. So we did the third coming people, you know, third coming and beyond did ride that trail again. It's just that they don't know what that trail was, and they think that somebody's going to come back and ride the trail of what they thought it was, which is going to be just the same old
another thing is
nonsense.
You could also consider the possibility that they weren't really on the trail to begin with.
That's what I'm saying.
Because if the trail that Brother Branham was on was leading to the third coming, third testament, and eventually love divine, and then out into everything else, they weren't on that trail to begin with. The trail that they were on was waiting for Jesus to return.
Right.
So they must have been expecting a subsequent ministry, but that would still only lead them to a carnal understanding of who Jesus is and the rapture.
They'd
and
still be waiting. Why do we need
They weren't on that trail to begin with.
Why would we need 60 years later for somebody to come along and tell us what would be the point? They've been telling us this for 60 years. The message people have been telling us this for 60 years. Why do we need somebody else to come along and tell us that, you know, their same view of it? Why would there be? Why do you need a major prophet to say the same wrong thing they've been saying for 60 years? You know. Anyway, I mean, not let's just say a rebirth version of William Branham type of a prophet. That's basically what they would believe it would be. That would come along and say, yeah, well, the rapture would be any day according to what they thought he was saying, and that was never what he was saying. And as Don Parnell said a while back, he said it's getting harder for as time goes on. I mean, I think this is pretty much what he was getting at. It's getting harder as time goes on for those people to sell that, because, you know, how long can you tell people that the rapture is going to be here any day? You know, and people ain't going to buy that for forever.
Right. Well,
you know, they're going to buy it less and less as time goes on, naturally.
Yeah. Well, from what I understand, the idea of a natural rapture is only about 200 years old anyway, and it was originated by a woman in a Pentecostal church.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
it's nothing at all that the original fathers, the 12 disciples, had in mind. You know.
Right. Yep.
It's hard to believe that they would have said Jesus isn't here, but he will be here someday. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They were saying, and I specifically remember Brother Parnell bringing this out in a sermon years ago. But they were saying the reason that they were under so much persecution is because they were telling these people, look, this guy that you killed is alive inside of me right here, right now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And if I were to say to someone, Abraham Lincoln is alive inside of me right now, and I mean it, you know, not in any kind of metaphysical, but I'm telling you that Abraham Lincoln is living inside of me right now, of course they're going to assume that you're crazy or dangerous or no needed to be persecuted.
You're getting awfully close to my idea there of tearing down the middle wall of partition between life and death.
Yeah.
If you think about it, because you're saying Abraham Lincoln's alive in you right now.
Yeah.
You know,
well, I mean,
you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. You know what
that's
I'm
what
talking
the disciples were saying. You
Yeah.
know, that this guy that was here in a body yesterday is now disembodied spirit living inside of me.
Well, see, that's why I don't believe in. I don't believe that there's a place we're going where there's dead people at, in whether in dimensional form or geographical form. I just believe that the living and the dead are all here. That when I look at Lucas, for example, now look, this is just my opinion on it. However, y'all take it for whatever, because I'm not saying anybody agrees with me, but or that it matters. But when I look at Lucas, for example, or my wife or whatever, to me, I see all the dead people that have ever lived. I don't feel that they're anywhere else. I just this is Abraham Lincoln. This is anybody you can think of. You know,
My grandma.
My
grandma.
Yeah, Kathy's grandma. This is Kathy's grandma.
Aloha.
Yeah. Close enough. So anyway, but you know, when he's talking about Abraham Lincoln being, but of course the idea had been that I don't know how to explain it, but the idea had been that the dead saints are not separated from us. You know, I think that's what Lucas is getting at, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the idea. And of course we got into, I don't mean to preach on my stuff here. I just want to, anyway, maybe I better quit. But
go ahead.
But I just, because I'll have to, I guess I'll do my testimony next. But anyway, what I'm saying is that I just don't believe in a middle wall partition between life and death anymore at all. I don't even believe. To me, it's like if we have made the other dimension, because we went into Aquarius now, and Aquarius is all about dimensions. So we made the other room essentially dimensional. Okay, and it's here, but it's so you can't see it. Okay, so to me, although that was better in a way or more modern, to me, I believe that that to me still has death has a sting. Because if we're waiting for so we're going to live here another 40 years if we're doing good, and then we get to go see all the dead people in the other dimension, then for 40 years I've got to live with the sting of death because I'm separated from them even still now, even though we think that they're just here, but you can't see them. So, you know, it got better than it used to be because we thought that they were on the other side of the universe or whatever, something like that, you know, depending on what you believe, but you know what I'm saying. But anyway, we thought that they were totally somewhere else, in short. Okay. So death had a terrible sting because it's going to be 40 years and we got to go fly across time and space to get to them. Okay. So anyway, and then we made it dimensional and said, well, they're here, but we just can't see them. They're just in another unseen dimension. Okay. Or they just dropped this part of the dimension and they're only in the unseen part of the dimension. Unseen part of the dimensions that exist here. Okay. To me, though, that's better, but that still has a sting of death. Because I don't want to be separated from them at all, ever. I want these people, the dead people, to be here right now, and I want to be able to see them. And to me, they're all here, and I see them in everybody. If I look at Lucas, I see the dead people. They're not in another dimension. William Branham said, you've got to have the TV set. He said, the TV set tuned in to where you could see all the TV waves that was always going on. Okay? Then he said, one day you're going to have a spiritual revelation, or not a spiritual revelation, it's going to be a scientific understanding that's going to make it to where you're going to be able to see all these dead people, essentially. They're all right here. Okay. Of course, the message didn't even get that. The third coming had to come along and explain what that was. But anyway, because they were still thought that they were on the other side of time and space, but anyway, or the universe or whatever. Okay. But anyway, I believe that it's a spiritual scientific understanding or invention that is essentially a revelation, because what is a spiritual understanding? It's a revelation that allows you to tune in and see the dead people that were always here, and I see them whenever I look here. I see them when I look at my wife. I see them. I've already got that device, that spiritual revelation scientific device to me, that I see the dead people, that they're all here. And there is no sting of death at all, because they're not separated from me for 40 years, because this is my grandma. Behold, my mother and my brother. You see what I mean? Literally my brother. Okay. So anyway, go ahead, Luke. So I didn't mean to cut in on your testimony there.
No, you didn't.
Didn't mean to preach a message there, but go ahead.
Okay. Have you ever seen a movie called Hereafter? there's a movie called Hereafter, and it's Matt Damon and a woman who I can't remember her name, but he is a very gifted psychic where he can easily commune with dead people. And then there was a woman who drowned in a tsunami in the tsunami of '03. She was on vacation and she drowned in the story. And she drowned for just briefly, and then they resuscitated her. And while she was dead, she saw people coming towards her, and she couldn't make them out very clear. They were like in a fog almost, but she was in the process of crossing over to this other place. Well, she ends up being revived, and then she is trying to figure out what exactly happened to her. And so she finds out about this guy, Matt Damon, who's a gifted psychic, and she goes to try to find him, and they start having these conversations about the wall of partition between life and death people. And then there's also a boy who is a twin, and his twin brother dies in a car accident. And he's hearing and seeing his brother at different points, and he can't escape like the ghost or the memory of his brother. And so he also goes out to seek them. And the three of them, they go on this intellectual journey of what's alive and what's not, what's dead. I'm pretty sure Clint Eastwood directed this movie. Great movie, saw it in theaters. Well, when I walked out of that movie, I specifically remember being filled with a sense of hope for life, or life, a sense of hope for the beyond. So I guess I said all that really because I don't remember any more details, but I said all that to say, if anyone gets a chance to see the movie Hereafter with Matt Damon in it, please put it on your list of to watch movies. And if you haven't seen it, I would definitely check it out. I can almost guarantee you it's on that super Roku I just gave you.
The super Roku. Yeah, the God Roku.
Super Roku.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but that deals with this notion of, is there a place where people are living out lives of a supernatural nature, digesting what their lives were like on Earth? Because my personal beliefs is that, my personal belief is that we go through a series of lives and afterlives. And I believe Jesus touched on this briefly when he said there's one life and then the judgment. He didn't say there's one life and then the judgment and then there's nothing else. So the way I see that is that we live this life, we enjoy it, we're limited because we're limited to 5 senses, we're limited to a very small section of the UV spectrum. Insects can see things that we can't even imagine because their eyes have the capacity to pick up light waves of different frequencies. And so we are honestly very, 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 very limited in our sensory perception in these physical bodies. And so there is a world of energy and a world of who knows what that we are not able to tap into. Even the idea of having a television that connects to a signal is still ultra limiting in what potentially could be out there.
True. And
you're still only tapping into visual and audio information.
And if I could throw in on that point, that's all a good point. Because see, whenever like you mentioned about the afterlife.
Yeah.
See, to me, this is the afterlife because we're always here. So if there's no separation of death and life, then you're always in life and the afterlife and the whole thing. But despite the fact that I think of it that way, I mean, obviously I grew up thinking, all the way back to the age of Pisces and then the dimensional Aquarian version of the other room, because William Branham said your dead relatives are here, they're just in the other room, so I call it the other room. So anyway, and then it's like this, though I have these ideas, it's not like that I'm, even before you said it, I was kind of wanted to hit this point. It's not like I'm limited to that because it's like all that Lucas just said, or all that, all the stuff that we've come through, every bit of it. I don't want to just put it just there because, like you said, with the bugs, they can see one spectrum and something else can see one spectrum, and this just might be one spectrum way of looking at it. But the point I'm trying to say is more this. I'm not saying think of it the way I'm thinking of it. I just want people to potentially think different things. To whether you like it or you don't.
I think what you're trying to say is you want people to know that there could exist an understanding which will free you from anything other than all life being here at one time. Because what you're saying essentially is that everything that exists right here, right now.
Well, I'm saying that is.
Or at least one way.
Yeah, I at least wanted us to get us to thinking that that's a possibility, and then because if you can't, you gotta at least think that that's a possibility, and then because that's where you can go higher. It's not so much about the way it is, but more so for me, it's about the ability to be able to think something that you haven't thought before, because that's great, and that's what we're talking about. That's really the underlying theme of this whole fellowship here has been so far, is that just to think something, to be able to potentially think higher than what you thought.
Thinking.
Yeah, out of the box thinking, exactly, and that's what I'm more concerned about.
This is strange. You kind of reminded me of MacGyver right now. MacGyver can make a tool out of anything.
Spiritual tool maker.
Yes, MacGyver can make a wrench out of a sock. With enough starch, you could make a wrench out of a sock or whatever. But the point is that he was able to make unorthodox methods to make necessary.
MacGyver of the message. I appreciate that, Lucas. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
You're in that vein of trying to say, hey, there's potentially another way of thinking about this.
That's what I'm getting at. I'm not so much concerned about what it is, but I'm more concerned about being able to think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say I'm not really interested in converting anybody, because I don't. I just want, if I want to convert anybody to anything, I don't want to convert them to my ideas that I have gotten to really or think, but I would rather convert people to being able to think itself. Mm. That's more important. Yeah. Now I am trying to convert people to that. I won't lie, but as far as where I'm at, that's not really. I mean, that'd be great if you did. I could have fellowship with people, but see, I can have fellowship with people that are just thinkers, even if they don't agree with me. That's the point. That's the whole point of me and Lucas. That's one thing that we have always come to, is that we don't have to agree with each other, but we're both thinkers, and and he can believe in however whatever he thinks it is, and I can believe in whatever I think it is. But we can understand what each other think. It's like Lucas was the guy. If you all heard me say this, Lucas was the guy who said that we're not trying to get people to think like we think. We're just trying to get people to see how we think. And that's the way we work. Yeah. And we don't care about what we think. It's like I can say something and be like, well, I think that's a bunch of crap, but I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. He don't say that, but
here's another thing, though.
But if he did, I wouldn't take offense to it.
If you say something that I don't disagree with, that also doesn't mean that I don't want to hear something else that you have to say about maybe another subject, or even more about that subject. It goes back to what Brother Branham said about eating cherry pie. If I'm eating cherry pie and I'm enjoying our conversation, but you say something that doesn't fit with what I've already got going on, that doesn't mean I don't want to hear more of what you have to say.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just I'm going to put this to the side, and maybe down the road, that little nugget that's stored in the bag will fit just perfectly right here in the corner.
Well, it's like this. If the best you can do as a person is being a cherry pie, that means that you've got some pits. I mean, you think about a pie. If all of us are pies, okay, and the best, cherry pie is the best you can do, or one of the best you can do, okay, all right, then we got pits. So there's going to be some pits in us that you got to spit out and keep going, and that's all of us. And I might be in a pit. I might be saying stuff that's a pit. Maybe it is. Maybe it's cherries. I don't know. But but that's what, if we can do that, we can really do some good. And that's kind of what Lucas's whole MO is to make it to where you can commune. You can commune despite the pits, basically. I mean, it's because he's more interested in harmonizing, and I'm more interested in perhaps being controversial.
Or not only being controversial, because I don't think you're trying to be controversial for the sake of being controversial.
Right, it's true.
But you are trying to be progressive.
And
that
controversy
creates controversy.
Yeah, being progressive tends to controversy is a bedfellow with progressive being progressive or being a thinker. But the funny thing
even progressive liberals are controversial in the things they're trying to introduce into our world. You know, I mean, look at Seattle. That's a very progressive-minded group of people, and yet they're a mess. So you got to have some balance.
And that was my next sentence. That see, though I'm really trying to be progressive and being controversial thereby. Also, my ideas on progressivism are that I really don't even like progressivism. So I'm even controversial on being progressive, on the idea of being progressive. It just gets
on being totally progressive. On being totally progressive.
Yeah, on being totally progressive. It reminds me of something that what was his name? Peterson. Jordan Peterson said?
Mm-hmm.
He said he went into this debate with this liberal, I believe. I didn't see it exactly, but there was this liberal, and he went into a debate with him because Jordan Peterson is like he's a thinker of all sorts, and he's a good example of free thought. So anyway, he goes into this debate, and really what he wanted to prove was more than what he wanted to say, what his own ideas was he just wanted to get the liberals to see that you could take liberalism too far, and he got them to basically agree on that. And that's my thought process on progressivism out here, is that you can take progressivism even too far. So I'm really not progressive, even though, but to me, that's a very progressive thought, that you can get people to realize that you can take progressivism too far. That's highly progressive. So I'm still a progressive, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
so let me tell you what's coming to my mind here, and that may not relate, it may not relate, it may not correlate. Imagine you're on the bank and you're fishing, and you're throwing out your fishing line. Of course, when you go fishing, you don't want a small fish, you want a big fish. But imagine you throw your rod out there, you throw your reel out there, and you hook a 1,000-pound shark on a Zebco 33. You're reeling it in. Next thing you know, it's just way too big. It's going to snap your line. It's going to pop your, it's just not going to work. And so, but then you go out and the next day and you throw it out there and you catch a nice 20-pound catfish sitting on the bottom there, and you start reeling it in. Your line doesn't break. Your line doesn't break. You take in what you can when you can. And there may be a time whenever you have some kind of massive sea, your pole may get to a point where you can, you might have a saltwater sailfish, swordfish, level of tackle, in a way to reel in that 1,000-pound shark. But if you try to take that in on a Zebco 33, it's never going to work.
Right. And
you have to take it as you can take it.
One of the best examples I ever heard of this, Lucas said it, and I was kind of working on it, but he put it into words, and it's like even if we don't agree, he sees what I'm trying to say, and he will, he might totally not even agree with me on certain things, but certain things he does, and then he'll come up with an analogy that clearly explains it. The keyboard analogy that you were talking about, where they tried to make the keyboard tried to make a better keyboard, and due to the fact you want to tell it, and then I'll.
So a while back, I was reading an article, and in this article, there was a computer guy, I guess, and he was convinced that he could find a better keyboard than a QWERTY, a layout. So he starts experimenting with different keyboards, and after 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, he found one that will allow him to type much, much faster than the typical QWERTY keyboard that we're used to. Well, then, as the months went by, I don't remember the full details of it, but he began to realize that even though as an individual he could type faster, it stunted him overall because it wasn't universal. There was something about it that prohibited him from being able to really be as proficient as he could be, because everybody else was using a QWERTY keyboard and his was not compatible with that, or something along those lines. So he came to the realization that the fact that the QWERTY keyboard was universal made it more efficient.
It made it, yeah, right.
And I've come to a similar conclusion with translations of the Bible. I've been frustrated for years with the King James because it's as a language, it's archaic. I'm not saying the Bible's archaic. I know how people can twist things. But just the syntax of it doesn't fit in the way I think, the way I speak, the way I read, and so I've tried different Bibles. Well, I found some that I like a lot, and I found some that I don't like as much. But the one thing I have come to realize recently is that in discussions with other people, if you're not quoting from the King James Version, that creates
much good as much as you've learned from the other.
It creates an instant, almost it creates its own language barrier. And even though it may be better for you to study and read and maybe more enjoyable, whenever you throw other people into the mix, if they're reading a different version of the Bible, then you're coming to different conclusions and you're just on a different train of thought. And so the universality of the King James Version, at the end of the day, makes it superior.
Right. It's the universal language, so therefore, yeah. It's like Lucas sent me this different version of the Bible the other day. And it's it's funny, we hadn't even talked about this, but I concluded that's exactly the same conclusion I came to when I was going to tell him this. That when it comes to that, he had some, I can't remember what it was translated out of, something like Aramaic. Aramaic. Okay, it's the common language of the people, I suppose, back then. Now, if you read that, I'm sure that you're going to get probably a good perspective, perhaps better in some ways than you would get out of the King James Version. Okay, but yeah, it's funny, I hadn't even told you, but I came to the exact same conclusion. It's that you could use that, and you could probably learn things, and then if you translated that back into the King James to try to talk to people, then you could maybe do some good, because you would get perhaps better understanding. It's like the same thing that William Branham did. William Branham would we all do this, but William Branham would read the story, and he would get a totally different understanding on it, and then just out of the King James. So just by revelation. Well, you could kind of do the same thing with one of those, with an Aramaic translation, and get kind of a totally different understanding on it, and like I said, translate it back. But nonetheless, short version is that just because you found something essentially more progressive in the keyboard or even in the translation of the Bible or whatever it would be, you still have to. There's still a great thing to the universal idea.
All right, I'm glad you said that.
The universal idea has its own strength, and that's what I've been trying to say. Is that we can go forward, we can go progressive, but there is, and that's got its own strength. But there is a strength all to its own of the universal idea, and that is that's kind of what I've been trying to say with kind of being in between the not going totally progressive, but kind of being in between the common man's language type of of understanding of ideology. Go ahead.
Well, here we go. It brings me back to the cross.
Oh, go ahead, go for it.
It brings me full circle back to the moment or the hours in which Jesus suffered and died. Because Jesus said, no greater love has a man than to lay down his brothers and lay down his life for his brothers. God, the Bible says that God demonstrates his love for us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And so I really believe that Jesus dying on the cross is that universal language of what love is. At that moment, by making that choice, by the Spirit making the choice to have Jesus crucified, by Jesus agreeing to that process, they exclaimed and manifested and magnified and shouted out loud, this is what love is. So Jesus' death on the cross, Christ crucified, is a universal language of the definition of what love is.
Yep.
Love defined.
And one thing that me and Lucas always talk about is Lucas's idea is, and we was talking about it earlier, he's kind of like looking at the Son, because he's more interested in bringing everything back to Jesus, Jesus suffering on the cross. Okay, so that's like the focal point, the sun in the sky, essentially. And I'm always kind of trying to bring it around in a big circle of everything, of all time. It's funny, we're kind of like opposites, but that works together. Opposites attract, essentially. So anyway, I'm all around time, and Lucas he's going to always go back to the cross. Okay, with anywhere we go, he's thinking going back to the cross. And me, I'm out in the whole circle of things. So he's looking at it from the perspective of the sun. He's looking at the sun in the sky, and I'm looking at it from like all the constellations going around the big circle. So anyway, I can't even remember what I was going to say now.
Well, that's okay. I have a point.
Go ahead.
I never even thought about this before. in the ages before the cross, before the moment where Jesus died, even when it wasn't the Piscean age or whatever age was before that, even all the way back at the beginning, whenever Jesus said, whenever God told Adam that that the heel would be bruised and the head would be crushed, even at that point on the timeline, they were still looking to the cross. Well,
Yeah.
wait. During the Pisces age, we were looking back to the cross, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why are we now, just because we're in a new age doesn't mean that we're not looking back at the cross. Because
right.
in the ages before, even one or two ages,
Right.
even from the beginning, we were looking towards the cross, then why wouldn't at the end we
Exactly
still be
right.
looking back at the
Exactly
cross?
right. That's right.
Because there's no greater example of love divine than Christ crucified.
William Branham said that in between Pisces, as far as I know, he said in between Pisces and Aries was the strongest point of the zodiac because Aries is where it begins. It's the baby from age 0 essentially, or 1 to 7. And then Pisces is the ages of 77, represents the ages of 77 to 84, which is the end. Okay, so in between there is the life, the death, and the life. Okay, so that's the strongest point. So yeah, that's where you look to, and that's where Christ is at, because he was crucified at the end of Aries and the beginning of Pisces, the death and the life right there. So, but what I was thinking was I got my thought back now. So yeah, we gotta. Even William Branham was saying, look to that point. You know, that's the focal point. That's the focal point of the zodiac. That's the focal point of the whole spiritual understanding. Is that right there? So yeah, we ain't taking nothing from Jesus, let's say. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So anyway, but here's what I think. Lucas was talking about how that the Christ, whenever he suffered and died on the cross, was the universal saying "I love you." It's the universal expression of love. Okay, and then he's always thinking in terms of the Christ right there, the Son essentially, and I'm thinking in terms of like all the generational in-betweens, you know, around the whole thing. And so to me, I'm trying to find that generational Christ. And so what I think that it always is because, you know, it's like you got to accept, before you do anything, you got to accept the main Christ between the Christ, like I call him the dude of all dudes. You got to accept Jesus between Pisces and Aries, you know. You got to accept that. I mean, that's a given, okay. So anyway, and then what I'm looking for is, because, you know, I did that at a young age, okay? So now what I'm looking for is then after that, after I understood Jesus, then I started looking at people like William Branham and Don Parnell, etc., etc. Okay? So what you do is you find these generational Christs, essentially. And they also have the universal language of, or the universal expression of love. But to me, what I think is that universalism, the kind of the universal thought process is the Christ. If you can find, every time that we move into a new age, then there's got to be like William Branham, what he did was and I use this term universal very, very carefully, because it could be misconstrued, but William Branham was essentially universal between Baptists and Pentecostals. Okay, so he was that universal. His message itself was the universal expression of love, because it was a universal message. So what I want to do is I want to find today where we've got like third coming people, we've got love divine people, we've got all this. I want to find the universal message that goes in between there, and that is to me the universal expression of love in understanding or revelation. To me, that's the way I look at it.
Well, not only that, if Christ crucified is the pinnacle of the universe screaming "I love you," there's no reason to think that it would have stopped. It's still sending out those "I love you" vibrations. It's still sending out our very being in the moment that we're in is it's a love song. It's a song of love being sang by an infinite being, and we are part of that.
it's like when you drop a rock in water.
Yeah.
And then when it goes plunk, that is Jesus.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, whenever it goes like this, that's like William Branham, Don Parnell.
Yes,
you know, that's
Wesley
like
Cook, Jamie Wesley. Well, no, come on.
Yeah.
Jamie Wesley, Jeff Elijah. That's all of us at different points in time. Love.
Yeah.
Love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we know because of what Jesus did, we have an understanding of what it is, but it's also being acted upon us day by day through our individual interactions with people. You know what I'm saying? Your interactions with Catherine throughout your normal day-to-day lives are echoes of echoes of love, and
it's like if Kathy washes the dishes, then that's her Christly expression of love for me.
Sure.
And if I cook her, or if I cook her some breakfast, you know, if I make her some coffee, then that's
me coming here to visit you is part of my
That's
expression of love for you.
And then when Lucas got here, I made him some instant coffee.
And it echoes,
I mean, that's
and it reverberates,
nice.
and
then we're like,
it reverberates.
The pond's going like this.
And it's just a fellowship and a love and a communion, and that circles back to my desires to have our post third coming family in fellowship. You know, sure, there's a lot of things that can divide us, but who's going to stand up and say, hey, I miss you, brother, and I want to be in fellowship with you?
Well, I tell you what, me and Lucas has talked a lot about this, and it's funny, we're getting ready, if we got time here, to do an oil change on his car before he goes off to the Lord's anointed. But anyway, okay. But we're always talking about how we our ideologies and things relate to oil or whatever it might be. Lucas, for those of you who might not know, there's a thing called Lucas oil, literally Lucas oil, and it's not really an oil; it's an oil additive, and it goes everywhere. You can put Lucas. You can't just fill your car full of Lucas oil and not put oil in it. But you put Lucas oil, you put a little bit of oil in, 3 quarts of oil in, and then you put a quart of Lucas oil into it, and it makes it run that much better. Okay, so what we are out here essentially is that all these ideologies, like whenever you went down to Charleston, you was down there.
Me and Brother Jamie had some great fellowship.
Right, so he's down there, and they're one type of oil, and you can stick a Lucas in that, and it makes it that much better. And then Lucas comes down here, and I'm another type of, me and Kathy's another type of oil. And he comes down to fellowship with us, and now my engine's running really good. You see? Then he's getting ready to go to Don Parnell's, and Don Parnell's engine's going to be running really good. Yeah, you see. So Lucas just goes, but Lucas is the ability, see, the reason he has this feeling, I think, of he wants to bring everybody together is because that he's the oil additive that can go with everything. Now, we may not be able to go with each other, let's say, but in terms of our ideologies, well, Lucas is still going to try, right? So anyway, I mean, the way I think of it is that I guess I can tell this whole story. I think I mentioned it before. I was watching Jay Leno, and he went down to George W. Bush's house, former president. And George W. Bush was telling about all the people he'd had at his ranch, and he's like, yeah, we had, I think, like Bill Clinton or somebody, former presidents down there. And Jay Leno's like, really, you had, because these guys are on the other end of the political spectrum, And he's like, really, you had them down here? Can you get along with them that good? And he's like, yeah. He said, it's not like what everybody says. This divisivism that you see on the news with these political parties, it's really not like that. You get in real life. We come together in real life. If I met any of these people in real life, I don't believe it would be that way. I don't feel that we would. But now on Facebook, yeah, I mean that's like the news. It looks like we're just at each other's throats and we all hate each other. But if we sat down, like the beer summit idea, it wouldn't be like that. I don't think it would be like that. So, but yeah, it's kind of yes and no. But anyway, Lucas is sure going to try. So, But I think that's the way it would be. The things get more.
So wait. We got a few minutes left. So how did you come into the message, and how did you hear about?
Oh yeah, you want me to do my testimony?
Yeah.
Okay. Well. Okay. What time you got to leave?
We got about 20 minutes.
Are you gonna?
No. We got
for the oil change?
No. Let me see. Let's see. It's 12:30 now. I would like to leave by 3 at the latest.
Okay. we could probably get you an oil change and done by then.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'll try to keep it fairly brief.
Oh, it stopped. Alright.
Had to be playing my song, didn't
Old time rock and roll.
I? That's funny how that works.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. So, if I'm going to give my testimony, here's my testimony, and I'm just going to tell it straight. And so, anyway, in the beginning, okay, all right. So, Lucas was talking about how that his people were Baptists and Pentecostals. My people were, my mom and dad were message people, mess-age people from since back in the 70s. And, but of course I had a lot of Baptist and Pentecostal influence early on because, though they were mess-age, they was heavily influenced even at that time by Pentecostals. And my uncle was a Baptist, and me and my uncle spent a lot of time, and he told me about all the ins and outs of the rapture and this and that. So I've been through all that too. But anyway, long story short, what happened to me was that I just listened to William Branham naturally growing up on occasion. Dad would always insert some William Branham, so I got William Branham from the very beginning, even if I didn't know it was William Branham. That was where he was always telling me stuff, so that's what you get, So anyway, then eventually I kind of got into it myself and started to wonder about it, and I went out to Jeffersonville, Indiana, and got baptized out there because I never did go to church growing up, really, maybe a little bit here and there, but not because, Mom and Dad were like, well, I think their kind of idea was that if you weren't going to go to William Branham Church, and going to church was kind of like, you know how it is. I mean, you ain't going to get that same type of deal. That's what Lucas is always talking about. He goes to a Pentecostal church because he's really got nowhere else to go down home. So, it's better than nothing, I guess, but I don't mean to downplay that.
Well, no, I go there because it's full of beautiful people.
Yeah, I know, but you still wish you could fellowship with people that believe what you believe.
Well, I mean, it's funny though, is that I wish I could be there right now because part of my heart at least is there with my Pentecostal family there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You take away the name of the church, you take away the building, you take away the style of music. At the end of the day, you still have warm-hearted, big-hearted people that love me and that I love, and I want to be there. You know what I'm saying? It's not about the doctrine as much; it's about the people.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally understand. That's why on occasion I would, I wanted to go too.
Yeah, my heart is no less there than it is here.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because you're everywhere, right? You're omnipresent.
It's just it's just beautiful people are beautiful people. You know what I'm saying? You go out past all of the religious aspects of it, and you're looking for beautiful people with which to fellowship and to have part of your life, and that's why I'm here with you and Catherine. But at the same token, I wish I were everywhere. I wish I could be in 10 places at once. I wish I could wake up in the morning and be with Brother Don, which I will be, but then I will,
Yeah.
But then I also wish I could wake up and be with my mother or my father, my stepfather, my brothers and sisters. I wish I could be with the people I love all the time. And see, that's my hopes for a conventional, traditional afterlife. I want to be there because the people I love are going to be there. All of the extra stuff, and is going to be great. But my heart is there. One of my spiritual fathers, his name was Ronald Sutherland, and he loved me as much or more as anyone ever has. And with all my heart, I believe he's going to be there when I step out of this body. He's going to be waiting there and say, "Hey, look, I can't wait to show you this place." You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
For heaven, for the fun.
But see, to me, I don't have to long for anything because I already have all these people. I mean, it might be in not the way everybody kind of maybe would prefer it to be. Yeah. But I do have that. I already have that. So, but I understand.
Well, whenever Don transitioned us out of the there was a lot of things that people had to let go of in order to step into the Love Divine era. And part of those things were this idea of going to the wedding supper of the Lamb, where there's going to be a lot of chicken and beef, that kind of thing. When that we had to let go of that. So there's definitely there's at least a metric for what you're saying in having to let go of that idea,
and that's
that
what
notion
I'm
of
saying.
heaven.
Yeah, that's a very
we had to let go of a lot of natural things that sounded cool, in order to move into the spiritual realities of it. And so there's at least a metric for what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. You get what I'm saying. Whether I'm right or not, it's like this. There is a metric. Yeah, there's a
precedent.
There's a precedent.
There's
a mathematical equation that does work out for that because it makes sense that it would be. It's become. We understand that how these things work is that you end up giving up. You give up what you thought you were going to have to get something, because it's like, I remember Don Parnell was talking about these people, and he was trying to say, he was explaining how things were, and they said, well, you're taking away our Jesus. And he's like, no, I'm trying to give it to you.
Right.
And see, that's exactly what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to, and people would say, according to my way of looking at it, they would say, well, you're kind of taking away my getting to see this person. I'm like, this person's went on like what you're talking about. I'm like, no, I'm trying to give that person to you because they're here right now. Now, whether they're there, okay, whatever, maybe we can debate that. But I'm saying that I believe firmly that they're here right now. So you're not waiting for the fellowship. I'm trying to give it to you. I'm trying to give you that person that's went on right here. But anyway, that's the metric. Whether you agree or not, that's what you're saying. It makes sense.
There is a established precedent for having to let go of normal human thinking of what might amount to a spiritual reality and stepping into a greater reality of the thing itself. You know what I'm saying?
And that's the whole core.
Well, even heaven, heaven as a place, we've had to let go of that to an extent.
That's true.
And to step into the true heaven, which is peace, love, and righteousness in the Holy Ghost.
Right.
Heaven. That's what Paul said. Kingdom of heaven is peace, joy, and righteousness in the Holy Ghost. And of course, that was established when he wrote it, when he said it. But it wasn't until recently that we realized what, through Brother Don's preachings, that we realized what it was really saying. Right. What it was really about.
And what you're talking about there with that precedence, that is kind of like a cornerstone. I don't know if but kind of like the cornerstone of what I'm always trying to say is that if you take all the things that we have learned on how to do algebra, because we're doing algebra now.
Right.
When you take that algebraic equation, then you can look at the things and you can say, well, it's based on the understanding of how to do algebra. You know how to work this equation, and you know that certain things are going to be given up so that you can have certain things that you didn't think that you had. You know what I mean? And then that's what I'm always doing with. That's why that whenever it comes to the understanding, like I'm always like reeling on the love divine and whatnot. The reason I do is because I'm looking. To me, there's a precedent of an ideology that this thing has to do certain things based on the algebra that we have learned.
Yeah.
I can't be any other way because people think that it's going to be this way, and I'm like, well, there's this algebraic equation that we learned all this algebra for some reason. And since we went to all the trouble to learn this algebra of how this thing works, I'm going to apply it and say these certain things are going to work out certain ways because that the algebra, the math says it will. And it's like Lucas, like one thing I noticed about Lucas since he's been here, he can feel you. He can like discern things through feeling, okay, because he's in tune with auras and whatnot, the energy, okay. I do it through reason. I do it through like kind of like logic or reason or something or math. I can like figure stuff out. I can figure out what's going on through an algebraic equation, through a spiritual algebraic equation that we've come to. And that's why that I'm like coming up with all this stuff is because I mathed it out. That it's got to, and of course math can change. Math can totally change. So, because we got to learn trig and whatever. So anyway, but let me get back to my short testimony. Okay. All right. So anyway, okay. So I go to Jeffersonville, Indiana, get baptized. Okay. So at that point, I'm a bona fide message person. Okay. So then I go to the message, find out there's a local message church. I start going to the local message church for, I don't know, about 6 months or a year. And then this is where the story gets good. Okay. Then I'm down there at the message church. And this guy, this preacher comes in, and he stands up in the pulpit, and he's like, you know that there are people that believe that they are in the millennium now, and here I am, a bona fide message person, waiting on the millennium. And this is what the guy says, and I'm like, what? People that believe that they're in the millennium now? What? So anyway, I go get on the computer, and I'm like, I gotta. It's so crazy. I gotta find it anyway. I gotta at least give it a listen, you know. And so I find Don Parnell, lo and behold, on YouTube, and he's talking all this stuff about, you know, the third coming. Essentially, at that point, it's been many years ago. And so anyway, that's when I had what I call my first real good old shit moment. Okay, that's what I call it. It's an old shit moment. It's like you know, Don Parnell's saying that the millennium is already on. You know, the rapture. I think he said the other day, I thought it was hilarious. He said, how did they expect us to go to a place where nothing dies and eat dead chicken and rice? You know, I mean, that's the old shit moment. You know, the rapture's already here. That's an old shit moment. You know, the whole thing. Okay, so anyway, that's where I had my old shit moment, the first one. And then, so anyway, I went down, and I was with them for a while. What's kind of like the third coming at the time. You know, everybody was kind of third coming at the time, but everybody had kind of different ideas on it. But they hadn't really come out yet, I think. Anyway, so you know, we're all together, and then what happened to me was in about 2013, this is just my testimony, I had another old shit moment. I know this might sound strange in today's world out here, but this is what happened to me. This is my testimony. I had another old shit moment, and I said, this was before the split or anything happened, and it really is only loosely related to that. I had an old shit moment, and I said, here's what's going to happen. I said, this thing is going to go into two modes, essentially, and I'm not going to be either one of them. Because I kind of thought the third coming, because I had already gone love divine without telling anybody at that point, in a sense. Because I was already to the point before, okay, I'll tell you this. We went out to Don Parnell's church one Easter, I think it was, or it might have been the yearly September meeting, whenever it was. So we're out there, and Don Parnell's preaching. He got up and he said, God and Satan are brothers. Now, I'm sure probably he knew that they were one at that point, but he was probably using that to test the waters. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he probably wasn't going to come out and say it. He probably knew that, and he was probably just using that to test the waters. And I was like, so anyway, you know, I don't know if anybody thought much on it at the time. So anyway, I go back, and you know, I'm down at Charleston Church. Anyway, I thought about it, and I'm like, I started putting together stuff that Don Parnell was saying, and I'm like, God and Satan are brothers. And then there was some other stuff he said, and I was like, I pieced it all together, and I was like, before he said it, I was like, God and Satan are one. Okay, so anyway, I go down to Pastor Wesley's church, and I was talking to Pastor Wesley, and I'm like, hey, you know, Pastor Wesley, I'm talking to him off camera, let's say, and I was like, hey, you know, according to this and what Don Parnell said, and what I can devise here, and what he said about, you know, this scripture says, well, this is the same thing as Satan. Here's the lily of the valley or whatever, you know, and so is Jesus. And he's like, I'm like, you know, God and Satan are one. And he's like, yeah, but, you know, you better kind of watch saying that, you know. I mean, at the time, obviously.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, because Don Parnell hadn't even said and put it in so many words. And so anyway, I was kind of like, that was another kind of an old shit moment, because when that happened, I was like, I became love divine, kind of. And I was never the same, even, you know, because everybody was still thinking third coming at the time. And I started thinking that way. And I became love divine right then. Before, I like to say I was country when country wasn't cool. Okay, I believe that God and Satan were one when it wasn't cool to believe it. Okay, when Don Parnell had not even yet said it himself. So anyway, that was kind of another old shit moment. It changed everything. And I went into love divine mode. It's like the way I looked at church, with church order, even at that time, church was totally different. And, you know, I didn't look at things anywhere the same. You know, it was like anything. It was all free game. It was all love divine, get naked and this and that, you know. And that was the way I thought. I became love divine. And then, but I was still there. I was still hanging out. But that's what I thought, what I felt behind the scenes. You know, and I couldn't really, I could only hide it to some degree, because I had some other ideas that were kind of like, Love Divine on out there ideas, and I was kind of starting to say them, and I was like, you know, kind of felt alone in a way because, you know, how could you say that stuff at the time? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So anyway.
Well, I mean, I think every prophet or everybody who has a realization, understanding, it comes to that same place where you basically know that nobody's going to fully, you might find one or two people to listen, but, you know, I've never read this in any of the material, but I know Brother Don said it. You know, whenever Brother Branham realized where he was on the brink of opening those seals and transitioning the whole world into a new age, he had to get up and walk around, and it was a shock to his system. You know, he had to get up from his desk, go outside, and walk around and just take it in and trying to digest what he was just seeing and realizing, coming to grips with the fact that he was ushering the entire human race into a new age. You know,
right? Yeah, no small matter, huh?
No small matter.
So anyway, okay. So at that point, I'm kind of like, I'm starting to feel all this, and then what happened to me shortly thereafter was I had, lo and behold, another oh shit moment. Okay, and it was like, you know, this. So anyway, so I'm hanging out. I'm still trying to hang out, and I kind of got these like wild ideas at the time, but I'm still trying to hang out, and I was still preaching, and I was like, some of the wild ideas were like coming out, and people were like, you know, they were probably like, what? You know, they were starting to, anyway, but it was still, you know, I was still keeping it under wraps. And so anyway, then I had another oh shit moment, right thereafter. And what that oh shit moment was I realized kind of essentially that this Love Divine type of ideology, that we call it the Love Divine now, or at least, you know, I mean, it's a general label. Even though I know they might not like to be labeled, but I mean, come on, it's, you know, it's a general label. So anyway, I realized my next oh shit moment happened shortly thereafter, and I realized that Third Comingism was essentially going to be Baptist, and the Love Divinism was going to be Pentecostal by comparison, because what it is that it's a Pentecostal thought process by comparison, if you think about it, because Baptist was cold, starchy by comparison. That's what the Third Coming essentially is at this point. And then the Love Divine is, you know, take off all your clothes essentially in terms of you know, holiness or
religiosity.
Yeah, religiosity. Yeah, it's a good word. You know, the whole thing. It's like take off all your clothes. It don't have to go by the word, this and that. Okay, so we can throw out. It don't have to go by that. And that's kind of like the Pentecostal equivalent, in my opinion. It's like we needed that. It's like, see, if you think about it, and I'll try to make it short, but if you think about it, Baptists and Pentecostals, what they were doing was everything was the church back then. Okay, so it was about, the Baptists were about church order. What got everybody mad was the Baptists were about church order, and everybody was a Baptist first, and then the Pentecostals broke away, and they were like throughout church order. Okay, and you know, you can walk around the floor, you can do whatever, you speak in tongues. Okay, so essentially that's what the Love Divine did to the Third Coming. They threw it out. They threw out their church order, what was left of it at that point, because we already got rid of the Second Coming. Okay, so anyway, they threw out the church order, and by relative comparison, they came up with a new modern like what the Pentecostals did. They did the same thing to the Third Coming in relative terms, and they threw out the order of things, in that the order that we had to go, it had to be this way that you think of the word and this and that. Okay, so my idea was that was what was going to be, and I wanted to find the William Branhamic equivalent. Okay, this is just my testimony, I gotta say it, right? So anyway, I wanted to find the William Branham equivalent, because I was like, if I can figure these people are Baptists, and I can figure these people are doing the Pentecostal equivalent by comparison, then there's got to be a William Branhamic equivalent, algebra. Okay, I mathed this out. Okay, it's spiritual revelated math, essentially. So I figured there's got to be a William Branhamic, a Branhamite equivalent to these two. And I was like, I want to hit the middle. And though I had went Love Divine, William Branham himself had went Pentecostal. Okay, so then he was like, wait a minute, there's a way in between here, that the bones of the Baptists and the blood of the Pentecostals, we're going to put that in the middle, and we're going to have this. Okay, we're going to have some church order, and then we're going to dance and shout. And that's the way I look at it, is that there's got to be some, but he wasn't a Baptist. What he did was he kind of took the Baptist mentality and modernized it and kept the Pentecostal part of it too. Okay, so that's what I want to do. I'm not third coming, but I want to take some core concepts of what we had there, and I want to modernize that. And that's probably why I get labeled as a third coming sometimes. But I want to take all the ability to
the freedom of the love
freedom
divine.
of the love divine and put that with it.
The freedom of the love divine.
Right, and put those two together.
The structure of the third testament.
That's it. Because see, ancient Israel, Judah and Israel. Here's what you had. Israel was the Pentecostals.
Airplanes can fly, but they can't fly without the structure.
Right. That's right. So you go back to ancient Israel. Judah was
a kite can fly, but it can't fly without being tethered.
It's got to be tied to the ground. You said that once before when we had this conversation, right? Yeah. So anyway, so what I'm saying is, like, you go back to ancient Israel. Judah was the Baptist mentality. It was the third coming mentality. It's where the temple's at. The temple is the core. That's where that's where you tie the kite to the ground. Okay, and then Israel was the ones that said, well, we don't have to go by that. Okay, and that was, whenever the story was, whenever Judah tried to go and take Israel back into the kingdom after they had left, God said, no, don't go do it. What's been done, I have done here. So I just want to say, let the love divine go and do whatever, because they're supposed to do that too. That's how the book reads. Israel split. Okay, the love divine split. That's how it's supposed to be. Okay, so anyway, but the core, that didn't mean that the core was not still in Jerusalem. Okay, you think, look, what was this about? David, it all comes down to David and Solomon. Who built the temple? Solomon. Okay, what was the third coming? The son of David. Okay, so the temple is the son of David ideology. The temple itself, the core message is that temple, it's the third coming, the son of David. That's what it was. Okay, and then you go into Israel, and Israel was the one to split off of that and said, well, we don't have to do it that way. That's the love divine, okay? So, now what happened was that, see, William Branham was Elijah, okay? So Elijah, Baptists and Pentecostals were all hanging out there, and then there was Elijah, William Branham, okay? Well, what was William Branham's message as Elijah? Right in the middle, the structure and the flight, okay? So, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to aim to be, is that I want to take this core message and this.
Have you ever seen the movie Flight of the Phoenix?
No, I haven't.
Flight of the Phoenix is a movie. Oh, who's the main character? Anybody who isn't the movies probably can know, but Flight of the Phoenix is a movie about a group of people who were flying from an oil rig in the Sahara Desert home. They were oilers. They were oil rig workers. And they were flying from where they were, trying to get back home. They were in Africa. And so at some point, their plane crashes. Well, after they crash, it's discovered that one of the passengers is actually an airplane designer. And he comes up with this wild idea.
I have seen part of that. Keep going, though.
He's going to take the wreckage that he believes that he can take the wreck of this large cargo plane and strip down only the pieces that are absolutely necessary, and then make another aircraft that will enable them to fly the rest. So they're in the middle of the desert, no water, limited supplies, no hope for help, and so they take this one guy who. Well, of course, later it comes out that he is a designer of model aircraft, but he swears, but he swears that the dynamics and the math should work out the same. So what he does is he takes the parts from this downed airplane and creates a smaller but still very capable aircraft that will fly them to safety. And so if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie, but that movie came to my mind as you were speaking.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
as someone
Because
who's
hypothetically,
taking these pieces and then rebuilding a smaller but much more capable aircraft to fly everybody to safety.
yeah, right. And that's
I'm ready.
okay, all right. Anyway, I guess we better wrap it up. But so I guess
Well, this was great. We've been planning this for what, over a year.
yeah.
Well over a year. You know, me and Wesley spent many hours on the phone because we're both we're the message night crew. We both work overnights, and so we're up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, hashing out all these things that we're talking about now,
Yep.
and much more.
Yep. We call it. I call it the Duke boys, the Dukes of Hazzard. They were driving around in the car with illegal moonshine, and I feel like we got some illegal spiritual revelation out here. It's we're running shine. We're running some revelation that may not be acceptable.
Popular.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess that's gonna do it.
I think so.
A peace.
Avita saying.